Kaiso Talk. And I promise you this evening we have a very, very interesting program. A lot of talk this evening, believe me. Yeah, we have some serious Kaiso people in the house tonight. All right. And of course, before I introduce them, I have to, of course, welcome all our viewers on GBN Television 711, our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, and of course, our listeners on K105 FM. We also say a very special thanks to our sponsor, the Grenville Credit Union. And just to remind you, this Friday in Grenville, at the Grenville car park, they have a lot going on. There's a big fair where you can, of course, get to sign up for the app. You can get $100 in shares. You can get your card. A lot happening at the Grenville car park. Of course, this Friday with the Grenville Credit Union. So be sure to go and be part of that. So, folks, Kaiso Talk. And of course, Val is with me as always. And let's first invite Val. Let's bring in Val. We're going to leave the guest for last. Val, good evening. And how are you doing, man? Welcome back.
Good evening, Godfrey. Good evening, Grenada. I want to say good evening also to Kyra Kupiti Martinique and everywhere that this program is being heard up the Windward Islands and so on. And good evening to our two guests tonight.
All right, good. I'm glad you know their names here.
Yes, I know them. I mean, Eddie and
but you had to call their name. Folks, let me tell you, tonight is all local. Yeah, Val is local, all local. We have with us a man who has been in the Calypso business for probably 40 years and counting. We're talking about the man el professor, Edison Francis, teacher Eddie. And of course, not a full-fledged Kaiso. You need to try a little thing, But when it comes to Kaiso and having information and understanding the art form, this gentleman, he's very, very, very. How should I put it? I need to find a proper word to describe him. He's an authority, so to speak. He's an authority on the art form and culture on a whole. We're talking about the man, Mr. Dexter Mitchell. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you two distinguished gentlemen on Kaiso Talk this evening. Eddie, how are you going?
Hey, good night, Godfrey. Good night to the listeners, the viewers. Good night, world, because I know we are the World Wide Web.
That's
so good
right.
night to the world, all who are listening. It's nice to be on such a program. I think it's going to be enjoyable.
It will. To ask you about Samantha, don't forget that one. We'll get to that.
She behaving, man. She ain't getting bad again.
Right. Dexter, how you going, man? How things?
Pleasant good evening, and thank you for having me, Godfrey. It's always a pleasure to talk Calypso. I like the introduction. We are talking Calypso. The singing part is for Teacher Eddie and those guys.
Definitely.
And good night to your viewers and listeners and to the other guests on the panel. Really looking forward to the conversation. Yes. And let me just commend you, Godfrey, because we are in April. Mm-hmm. And we have a Calypso program on. We are talking Calypso. That is very, very commendable. We're not waiting until the Calypso season or the Carnival season to talk. And I think keeping it alive, keeping the conversations alive, not just waiting until the songs come out. It is very important for the preservation of the art form.
But Val, when did we start that program? Was it last week in February or early March?
In February.
Yeah.
Yes,
it was. I think it was the last week after Independence. Yeah. So we've been around. We've been around.
Nice.
We like
we're bridging the two sets of carnivals: Carnival in Trinidad and Carnival in Grenada.
Yes, indeed. So tonight we're gonna definitely start with Teacher Eddie. Eddie, you've been around forever. Singing Kaiso and doing your thing, helping the young ones, and we're gonna get into all of these wonderful conversations. But first, Edison Francis. Let's talk about Edison. Tell us who is Edison, and then we're going to move from Edison to Teacher Eddie and then to El Professor and go down the road.
Right, so I got to reverse. So Edison Francis is now a retired teacher.
Right.
former teacher, IT teacher at St. David's Catholic Secondary. There I taught for 23 years. And also taught at St. Joseph RC Palm Rose, my foundation school, for I think it was 15 years. Studied IT at SGU. Also had a stint in Cuba. So I have a diploma in Spanish, and I studied for a little while in Cuba. I mean, I didn't really finish Cuba. I came back and competed at SGU, right? But I'm happy for the experience there. So I have a language, and that's why the ill professor.
Well, I'm making the connection.
Right. So that's me. I'm a husband of 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Well, big. I mean, I call them kid boy right now. Them is big people, right?
Yes.
Big people. No more little children. That's me. I'm born in St. George, though, and grew up only maybe for 5 years in St. George. Moved to Malmont, but the roots grounded in Latant, and in my mom is from Madiga.
Okay.
Yeah, so
wonderful.
Right, so that is me basically. I mean, been around according to you as forever. This year I'm celebrating 40 years. I mean, some people may want to feel 4 decades. That's a big celebration. But I've been the kind of cool person I am. And I just played it cool.
Yeah. No. This is significant. But just before we move from there, growing up as a young fella, let's talk a little bit about that. Your childhood days growing up, and because there must be something there that would have kind of sparked that thing in you to where you are today.
Right. So I remember as a little boy, I used to run away to go and watch Trinidad Carnival. And I like the Kaiso, so all the crazy dustbin cover and them kind of Kaiso way back down in the 70s. I used to little run away because we didn't have no TV. I can't even think we had current, so I had to go by a little neighbor and watch a little black and white TV there.
Yeah.
Watch I didn't used to miss the match guy Trinidad, so I used to run away, go watch that sometimes. All morning, after 12, I walk in the road to go back home. So that was my first love of Kaiso. I just love Kaiso from then, since that little boy thing, and listening to Kaiso. So I could tell you all about Merchant and them fellas and them from way back down there. I like them kind of Kaiso. Kaiso was just my thing, And then in 1985, I jump into the Kaiso ring as a frontline singer, because prior to that, I was involved with the juniors. When I left school and I started to teach at St. Joseph RC, I worked with juniors. I remember when Usman Kelly won the junior monarch with Earthquake. That was my first. I wasn't working with Usman, but I had some, I think it was 2 or 3 youngsters from my school took part in that competition. Right. And I never really stopped from there working with juniors. So from 83 right till now, still in with the junior Kaiso and kind of trying to mold some new Kaisonians, So that is it in terms of Kaiso. So from 83 right up. But as I say, I came into sing in 85 when I sang with Tremors.
Right.
And Godfrey Tremors was the practice was in Wester Hall, right? And by 2+2. And when I finished practice, I had to walk from Wester Hall to home.
Yeah?
I really don't think Monday will beat me. I cry. I say I ain't going back. I cry. I say win, because in them days, no bus and thing, no. When the man who bring the band men, he had some handmen from up central. They passed me on the road, but they ain't gonna squeeze me in that vehicle. So I had to walk up from Wester Hall to that, and sometimes I try to go early, but it doesn't matter. You're a rookie, so you must stay for last to practice. Yeah, so when you don't practice, you have to walk.
Yeah,
so the road wasn't always that smooth. It was a rough coming through that, and but I just in love for it. I stayed around, I made my first semi-finals in 87, right? And it was from there to now. I think last year I was saying I had about 30 semi-finals, but I think it's somewhere close to 30, because I think I didn't drop off the COVID years, and then there was a year we stayed off. So more like 28, 29, but I'm 30 times in the semi-finals and 13 times in the finals.
13 times in the finals. That's something. That's a lot. All right, Dexter, let me come to you. I know you've been listening to Eddie intently, and I'm sure from your interactions with a lot of Calypsonians, that story, I'm sure you may have heard that story before.
Yeah, of course. Guys making sacrifices, and I mean, even when I got involved, I remember his name slips me now. The guy who sang about the doctor. The man was a nice man.
Abby.
All right. Yeah, I remember one time going to a show in the cinema in Grenville, and on the way I met Abby in around Cambly at the Flat Bridge, and he had forgotten his clothes at home, so he was going back to Bylands, walking to get his clothes to walk back to Grenville, and obviously I picked him up and took him and so on. So yeah, the commitment, when you talk to a lot of the older guys, the inspector and so on, I think Inspector said one night Pre-Mantis left him after a show in Govan, and he decided he had to walk from Gov to Sotez, but he eventually got that right. But that was a kind of sacrifice, and to me, that is why it is important to still preserve the art form, because it is built on the backs of people like Teacher Eddie. That sacrifice, that commitment, that dedication cannot be taken for granted. And then I would say this to the economic impact of Calypso. So, for example, what does Calypso contribute to Carnival? And we're not just talking about the Dimash and those things, but a Calypsonian, for example, will sacrifice $5,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 every Carnival season to produce 2 songs. That is a value that has to be added, in addition to the other sacrifices.
Right.
So the time that you have to sacrifice, the effort you have to sacrifice, the time away from family and so on. So I think those stories have to be told more. And again, that's why I commend the program, because people take it for granted that Carnival comes around, they might just write 2 songs, listen to 2 songs, and they put it on the radio, they go on stage and they win a money, and that's it. But it's a lot of sacrifice. And I know it's even with transportation and so on now, it's still very difficult because of the band situation, the limited times for bands to practice, for tents to rehearse and those things. So you basically just have 1 or 2 shows into the semis and the Calypso finals. And then you don't have the airplay as before. Remember, Calypso did not have to compete with anything back then. So you actually had airplay for Calypso, so now you're competing with everything else for airplay. But the story is very familiar. I mean, all those guys will tell you, even my growing up listening to Calypso, and it started for me in 1980 with Survivor, Wood on the Crapo Back, that one road match in 1980, and then of course Timpo in 1981. And I think the revolution must be credited among all the other things we could discuss. But there was an explosion of culture during that period, 1979 to 1983. So young people like me actually got exposed, going to the community centers in the Calypso shows, getting to go on stage and do poetry and so on, and getting to meet people, getting to meet the Calypsonians because they were coming to the cinema in Goa, for example, and that kind of led to an explosion and an interest in Calypso. Plus, you didn't have much option. There was one radio in the house, and when you put it on my grandmother put it on, you couldn't listen to anything else, So, But the story Teacher Eddie tells is a familiar one, and I think it has to be documented, so that people know that this came from a long way, and it was built on the backs of people who sacrificed a lot.
Yes, indeed. All right, Val, let me come to you, and you listen to Dexter and Eddie. Have you heard similar stories in Trinidad? I mean, you've been around a lot of Calypsonians. Have you heard similar stories from Trinidadian Calypsonians?
There are always similar stories. What I got from Eddie, I probably want to ask both Eddie and Dexter, that Eddie marked the 80s as his the point that he connected and came into Calypso. Reference the same period, so that early 80s period. I would like to know from them, before to expand the conversation, what period, what era do you consider kind of golden era for Calypso in terms of Grenada? Because in Trinidad, one would definitely have to look at the 30s, where Lion and Beginner and all of those guys were putting down the work, right? So that the 30s and that movement towards recording in the United States with Decca and so on, as a kind of golden era. And it grew. So that by the time, like Sparrow came onto the scene in 56, a certain kind of, a foundation was already laid. People knew how to navigate this track. But listening to Dexter and Eddie, Merchant and Crazy started, this Dustbin cover was about 78.
Yeah, 78, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Merchant and coming. So that's kind of recent for us, as opposed to looking at the 30s. So I wanted to get a sense of that. When can you consider kind of golden era? When was this foundation for Calypso in Grenada laid down? Dexter, I think probably you are more apt to answer that question.
I would say, and I'm going based on my research, and last year, I think it was sometime last year, I did a series of articles. I think it was a 6-part series chronicling that specific period. So it was 1981 to 1995 would be that golden era. And it is specific, and I named the article that series Goodnight Queen's Park, which was a common refrain when artists came on stage, when the Calypsonians came on stage, they would say Goodnight Queen's Park. The MCs would say Goodnight Queen's Park. When they finished the songs, they would say Goodnight Queen's Park. And what we found is that in 1981, Carnival was moved from February to May and then to August. So the Grenadian Calypsonian had the opportunity to engage the Trinidad and Tobago arrangers. So later on, you had guys like Pelham Godhard, Leston Paul, Frankie McIntosh from St. Vincent available to make songs for Grenadian Calypsonians because they were not tied up in the February Trinidad Carnival. So the quality improved. Then we had better recordings with the opening of Moss International Studio up in St. Andrew. So the quality improved. Then there were some bold moves on radio. Troy Garvey and Harold Paisley. Troy Garvey started to play Calypso on Sundays. So there was more availability. So guys were incentivized to record songs and make it available. Recordings were actually done at the radio stations. So they would bring in live bands, they would record it at the radio stations and make it available for airplay. So those things contributed to that golden era. And I would say specifically 1981 to 1995. And then just prior to 1995, things changed with the introduction of Soca Monarch, so that the Calypsos now became 2 slow songs, as opposed to a jumpy song in the second round and the social commentary or political commentary in the first round. And that kind of, from then we saw the kind of slowing down in the interest of Calypso, competing with Soca Monarch. And then it became very political. I mean, and I know, well, you know that from Trinidad too. Once you start to sing politics, not social commentary, but political commentary, it means that half of the audience is for you and half is against you. And that kind of, our case kind of led to a divide. And Teacher Eddie is smiling because Teacher Eddie knows he avoids it. He sings social commentary. So an example I came up with is Gypsy. Gypsy's captain, the ship is sinking, can be played anywhere, any Caribbean island. It can be played in a man and woman relationship if a man could come and tell you, hey boy, your ship's sinking, But then when Coco came and said, and Lady Jill is waiting, then that is a different Calypso altogether. He's specifically calling somebody name. Half of the audience is going to like it and half of the audience is not going to like it. So, yeah, but I would say our golden era was 1981, specifically 1981. Tempo will want to Carnival to about 1995.
I want to jump in here.
I don't know if I want to chime in here. Yeah, I would want to share that same sentiment in terms of what I would consider as the golden era. But I remember, I think it was the late 70s when Moss International brought in the Kaiso Castle. And that to me was a revolutionary period in terms of the change. But the golden era would have been the 80s into the 90s for me.
I mean, while I agree with you guys, I want to put an addition, because I think that golden era, there was a launching pad for that golden era, and I think that launching pad for that golden era was the years 1976. 77 and 78, because Flying Turkey, from the olden days of people like the Melody and Papi Tet and so, it was the Flying Turkey who came in 76, that young good-looking fella from the bank, and stunned Grenada with this Kaiso King from Hell. King from Hell.
Yes.
And Flying Turkey won the Calypso Monarch. In fact, he was the first person to win the Calypso Monarch in Grenada 3 consecutive years, 76, 77, 78. Now, Turkey wasn't the only person, although he won the crown, but we had some other very powerful Calypsonians. Remember, we had Darky. Darky was a powerhouse. We had Defender. We had the Immortal Chain. In fact, in one of those, I think it was 77, Chain came third. Defender second and Turkey first. And you had those guys, Gospel. So there were some Calypsonians, and again I say, while I agree that may have been the golden era, but I think that late 70s, 76 to 80 was that launching pad for the golden era. So that mine, that gold mine was dug, and the gold sprung up from that. I don't know if
I share the same sentiment. I share that because I was thinking about I was thinking about Mars International and the same Immortal Chain, because I sing a song for Chain that he sang somewhere down in the 70s, and he was laughed, you know. But I would share that because I remember in Turkey. I mean, I was a little boy. I used to run away and go to the tent to end, not just to go and watch Kaiso on TV, but I used to go to the tent. I like that. And to me, I just love anything musical. Because I remember my music journey, I would say, started maybe around 4 years when my father was a member of Nativity Youth Club, which was a club in St. David. And they had a concert, and he brought me and my brother to sing in a concert. I think I was about 4 or 5. And rather than sing, I mean, we really get on the stage curl with us. But 2 little boys, we just singing and we going. And I think it was some song from Barbados, come here to drink milk, come here to come out, something like that.
The Drittons too, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right, so that is my first on-stage appearance, you know. But I would share that same sentiment, Godfrey, that is around the Turkey era and into the 70s. 80s and so on.
Yeah.
They lay the foundation for that.
But Godfrey, I just want to just chime in one thing, Dexter. Don't want to stay too long on it, but it seems also that I remember like listening to, let's say, Radio Free Grenada, you know, so that there seems to be an alignment with the change of the politics and the opening up of Calypso, and Calypso getting that confidence in itself in Grenada to express itself among a younger generation of people and so on. Those things seem to kind of come together at that point in time. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Yeah. Dexter, go ahead.
Let me just touch on what Godfrey said about the launching pad. And even prior to that, remember in the early 70s, you had the original inspector, people like Unlucky Lady Beginner. So that kind of set the tone. But what Turkey did was completely revolutionize the art form, because not only was he a good-looking young fellow working in the bank, remember he came from the GBSS hostel.
Right.
The headmaster at the hostel was the legendary Sir Paul Spoon. So coming from that kind of background and singing Calypso, it kind of took away the stigma that Calypso was this kind of saga boy thing, melody and puppeted, people who want to walk and chase woman and drink rum and put on the pretty shirt and so on. You had an intellect now singing Calypso, and then you had topical issues. The Defender coming in, Soka Boka, who was a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, Boka came in the 80s.
Yeah. And then to touch on what Val said, the revolution itself interrupted that, because it would not have been the launching pad. That would have formed part of the golden era had it not been for the revolution. Because remember, after Turkey won 76, 77, and 78, he went into the army. He became an officer in the army. And so he stopped singing. And when he came back in 84 after the revolution, he immediately won the Calypso Monarch and the road match.
But not only that, let me just add in that this is when he came back with the Byron, he came with a new evolution where he actually introduced the presentation with this man coming from the crowd and had people scampering because they didn't realize it was part of the whole presentation. So there was this constant transition of the art form, in those years. And
then one of the other things, as we talk about the golden era, just to finalize on that, was the rivalry among the Calypsonians. Because if you do the research and you listen to the songs, what will happen, Val, here is that guys would sing on each other. So we kind of stayed away from the politics, and that is what made it interesting. So Ajamo, for example, and people would say Ajamo would always sing about himself, but he'll always say in Calypso, I'm better than you. And whatever you sang, he's going to come back and sing something about it the following year. Praying Mantis did that to some extent. He answered a jam a couple of times. Inspector, when he got frustrated, and he came in 1989 and said, I'm coming back like a hurricane, and he touched on everybody in that song. So that also led to the golden era in that it was a lyrical battle that was played out on stage on the Matrica night at the Queen's Park.
Yeah. What I'm hearing in that, Dexter, is what is also very consistent in your parang. So you're kind of drawing from one form and bring it into another form. Yeah?
Exactly. Well, let me just say, let me take the high road and say the parang is an extreme version of what we're talking about.
very extreme. But Val, I want to come back to you because I was asking you about the stories and so I don't know if you probably make some references or examples as to, because even what Dexter spoke about with the rivalry, I think we one of the biggest rivalries we had in Trinidad was Sparrow and Kitch. And even with the people like the Blakey and so on, I mean, singing on Sparrow and Sparrow and Melody and all of that. So is it a Caribbean thing?
Well, yeah. The thing about you had rivalry. I say Trinidad, you definitely have to locate it in the 30s, right? So between Attila and Lion, there was a big rivalry, you could say that, there, right? So you had Attila and Lion, you had the, what his name, making a big hit, Rum and Coke, right? Invader. That would have set off people on a particular road, right? When also the Belafonte picked up Melody and utilized his song. Sparrow went looking for him because he wanted to become big too, right? Like that and want that kind of thing. So those things have always been there. It's part of the Caribbean. We are coming out from an enslaved past, limited opportunities. Men using their talents to promote themselves, so that you have that kind of constant competition. Even down to today, you still have those fierce rivalries. The thing about it is that for a number of people emerging, I like to say the yard rather than the ground, winning a calypso competition is still a major passport to financial success, right? So Black Adan coming to Trinidad and winning a title and getting $1 million, if you translate that into EC, that's probably about $450,000, which is way better than your Monarch, which is probably around $75,000. Right, so that money and how that could transform lives are part and parcel of this journey, and how we look at that. Maybe you will find that the competitive aspect, there's more competition than cooperation happening, and we need to look at that. So there are a number of things, but yes, Godfrey, there have always been those kinds of rivalry, but in a way it has always been pushing other people, right? Sparrow in coming out as a youngster, Harley B. Todia would have taken him into the country areas, and he would present himself as Melody to people in Mayaro and Guayagayari and so on. Yeah, Melody was the big star. Right? So people in Mayaro and Guaya and Rio Claro, they don't know, they have never seen Sparrow. So Holly would take Sparrow, a young fella, and carry him in the country areas, and he would present him as Melody. Right? So that and you could see Sparrow and listen to Sparrow, the early Sparrow, and he was a ballad singer. So he learned to sing calypso from listening to Melody and so on. So while there was rivalry, there's also admiration for the person there.
Right.
Yeah.
Eddie, I want to come to you.
Our rivalry too also led to what still continues, and it has translated into the Sokomona competition, which is the Picong Boss. That on the night of competition, you have to add this verse that you have to sing on your opponents. And I think I referred to Inspector's 1989 Hurricane, probably one of the greatest Picong bosses in all of Calypso. But that has been a hallmark of Calypso here in Grenada and the Calypso competition in those days, that people were looking forward to that. And the second round of competition, you had to say something about your opponents. Remember Gambo's City Crown, they take it when he sang. He actually went back to and wrote a verse on Squeezy, what Paul Squeezy had presented his Calypso in the first round. And you see the young guys now, the Dash, the Boise, and so on. I think they refer to it now as the kill boss. They kill the competition, but that again was part of the competition, part of competing and part of the rivalry.
Yeah. Eddie, throughout the years, let's talk about the journey. And I want to talk a bit about your journey in the Kaiso. Take us through. So you started in '85. You got in there in '85, and you told us about the semi-final appearances and so on. But take us through that journey, your Kaiso journey through the years.
Okay, so in '85 when I sang with Tremors, as I said, the tent was based in West Tower. Because of the experience I had in terms of the practice and the lateness and moving alone, I decided in '86 I going with a tent that was closer to me. So I went in '86. I went with now Tremors. I can't remember what his name, but it was a tent closer. I try to remember the name of the tent. I can't remember, but I know one man, Mr. Checker, and so on. There's all the people who organized that tent. So I stayed at, was it Kingdom? I can't remember, but I stayed up closer, and then so that was '86. In '87, that was my first semi-final.
Right.
All right. So 87, 80, and then '88 it was another back-to-back semi-final. '89 I missed the semi-finals. I think 90. I think I missed the semi-final. '91 I think I get back into semis. '92 when I came with Samantha. And then the big break for me came in '95. '95 was my first final.
First final, right?
Yeah, first final. So in '95, '96, 96 I'm back in semis. '97, Kaiso cricket back into finals. '98 I think I was back into finals again. And then we move into the I went up in '97 to Cuba. And then when I came back in 2000, we stayed up in 2001. Right, that was when we had the matchup. The thing that killed Kaiso in Grenada in terms of organization. And it's surprising that, I mean, from 25 years afterwards, Kaisonians can still come together and be like one. But that is history. Yeah, and then so, I've been knocking back and forth into the semi-finals until 2005. So from 2005 was my big break. For 8 years straight, I was in the final. So 2005 way up to 2012, 13, somewhere up there, was always final. And then after that I had I missed the finals, but so in the last 25 years, Godfrey, I only missed one semi-final.
Right.
Yeah, I had one semi-final. And so I came back in 2016 and 2017 into the final. Then 2018 we had that kind of mix-up thing with me and Alan G and the judges writing my somebody Kaiso name and my Kaiso sheet and all of that. And then COVID came, and then since there I was been in the semi-finals but not breaking back into the final.
Into the final, not as yet.
So that is it in terms of the history and thing.
Right. I'm coming back to you, but Dexter, and you have also been in a position, the organizational structure of the thing, the carnival on a whole. But as we talk in Kaiso, and Eddie mentioned the 2001 fiasco where things went bad, and since then, Kaiso has not been able to, or Kaisonians have not been able to bounce back. And I'm going to throw it at you, Dexter. You are at that level. Why haven't we not able to get back to where we're supposed to be? How bad did this affect Calypsonians? So much so that we still struggling there.
It's interesting though, because I was part of Teacher is laughing. I was part of the organization that was awarded the contract that created the confusion.
You're part of the mashup.
Yeah, but what I did when I saw where it was headed, I was not in agreement with where it was headed, and the division it was causing. So I remember Richard McPhail was the PS in the Ministry of Culture, so I met him in Bob on 2019 and said, I'm going to stay out of that. I'm going to err on the side of culture and carnival. But this is not going to last, and carnival and culture will always be there. So I opted out of that. But it has become more about personalities, because 25 years later, most of the people who are involved now don't understand why there's a divide.
Right.
And I know when I was CEO of the Cultural Foundation around 2010, there was a really great effort by Mr. Hugh Holland to bring the two parties together. And I think we were very, very, very close. But then the inner workings again, and it was not his fault or the Calypsonians' fault. I think the other people around, the chairman of Carnival, the Minister of Culture, and so on, kind of got in his way. Although he was given a mandate to bring them together, I don't know if the success was happening too quickly for the people who gave him the authorization to go ahead and do it. But to me, it's just a matter of personalities, because I think if we get people to sit down and have a conversation and ask them why is there a divide, why are we not seeing eye to eye, they really cannot tell you. Mm-hmm. And I think after, and I mean, no teacher already mentioned it, 25 years is scary to think that it has been 25 years and we are not closer to resolving the issue, to getting the split together. Mm-hmm. And I think it is time that grown adults sit around a table and actually talk once and for all and say, hey, we need to move on in the interest of carnival, because what has happened is that it has hindered the development of Calypso in Grenada, the Calypso art form, the competition, because there is always this divide and rule that we could go to one side or we could go to the other side, or we're going to listen to one side over the other side. And they keep the powers that they keep playing them against each other, as opposed to there being one serious, strong, unified body to represent Calypso and Calypsonians. And the thing is, there is a lot of interest in Calypso. This notion that Grenadians don't like Calypso or Calypso is dying is not true.
No, that's a joke.
When you know that obviously Godfrey, you do events. I mean, I did the 50th anniversary Independence Calypso show and saw the attendance was like. But because there's this divide, the powers that we can always use that and push them around. So, for example, Teacher Eddie, the Calypso show, the finals was moved to Progress Park, which was a huge success. Mm-hmm. It was moved to a Thursday night. I'm not sure how I feel about the Thursday night, but I'm pretty sure that it should not have been moved back to town. It should remain in Grenville. Mm-hmm. There is obviously an audience. People like driving up to Progress Park or Simona when that was available for the show. But if there was one unified body, they could have come together and say, hey, this is our conditions. We want the show to be at this place, and it was going to happen. But when you know, okay, some might stay out. If some say they're not staying out, then the powers that be, I mean, you bring it back into town, and then again, there's no interest. You cannot bring it into a big stadium on a Sunday night. But if you keep it in Grenville, if you keep it in Progress Park, there's obviously a lot more interest in it. And a unified body can go to government.
You could possibly grow from there. A kind of regrowth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't know, maybe I'm putting it on Teacher Eddie, and I would help if I can, because I still feel a little bit guilty being there in 2001. But just to have some conversations, like as adults, hey guys, what really is the problem? because nobody is really benefiting as it stands right now. Even the breaking up of the Judges Association, I think Grenada was the first state that had a Judges Association. So even that, and it was not just about getting it right, but getting more people to be interested in judging Calypso, to be interested, to have conversations. Remember, there used to be a PR person who would go out and go on radio and TV and explain to the public what the judges are looking for. So even those things have kind of deteriorated the interest in the art form and the quality of songs. So yeah, I think that time has come. But teacher idea, you have the time now. Let us just get some people together and have a conversation.
But hold on, guys.
I mean, we had conversations already. To me, the whole thing is that I did a Kaiso called Kaiso Cry.
Yeah.
And when I think Kaiso made me cry was because the failure of Kaiso and to come together. There are some people that are holding on to past things. People just holding on to things and they don't want to let it go. And to me that is sometimes I tell people Kaisonians are the biggest enemy of Kaiso. People might knock me for that. Because we have two associations. Yeah, we had them on paper, they're registered body, so you can't really do nothing much. People could take stock, but they are a registered body, they exist. They're supposed to have a constitution, but I ain't sure that they follow in the constitution, right? I mean, they surface at Carnival and say, okay, you belong to this one, GPAC, GCCA, wherever, and people claim belonging to. But when that's done for the year, what you hear anything about them? We don't function like a body. We are registered, so we have that name and register in the registry that yes, this is a registered organization. But are we functioning as an organization? I don't think so, right? And I mean, Dexter, honestly, I say I pass that stage. I listen to a soca artist talking one time and talking about shows and Grenadian artists, and I said, boss, we passed that stage. When we had one association, Dexter would know that we had power. We were able to get when foreign artists coming in, we were able to get a certain amount of local to match. We had that kind of power, but no, artists talking about things. You're paying them little local artists now. Them men who mashing up the shows. And I'm talking not just Kaiso, soca, everything included under the umbrella. The fellas who mashing up the show, they get less than them foreign artists that are coming in here. So, but I fought that battle, and I said I'm not going to fight that again. As a matter of fact, I'm the on paper I'm the vice president of GPAC, but I'm not prepared to fight any battle like that again. I made my contribution. I'm satisfied that I made my contribution. I did what I had to do, and I'm not interested in fighting. I think some young, vibrant folks supposed to take the mantle and run with it. Just as how we came out. Because when I came out, I was a little boy in the Kaiso thing with when we brought in Glenn and Ogilvy and them fellas and them in the thing. I was still young in that. I didn't hold no executive position in that. I was young, but I was always in meeting. I was always there. I love the art form. I wanted to see things go well, and I was always in support. Yeah, so we need some people like that now to take the thing and run with it. Even we mean forming a new association, and let the two fade out. Yeah, sorry.
Let me just ask this.
Sorry, as teacher Eddie was talking about, I remembered something now. And key to that discussion is that after the boycott in 2001, the government of the day panicked. And two things happened coming out of that. One, the Sunday morning juvies. So the government thought it made sense to buy paint and give to people to have this Sunday morning juvies as part of the build-up. I don't know where the idea came from. As part of the build-up to Carnival, to ensure that there was a Carnival spirit, because they didn't want to appear as though the boycott affected Carnival. And two, people, associations, mass bands, people involved in Carnival were given money to participate in Carnival in 2001. That money eventually became the subvention. So I think part of the challenge in moving forward is that people might feel with one association, there will be less money in the pot. If it remains two associations, there is more money to go around. And so I am a king in my castle, and I have my share of the cake. If we form into one association, that, let's say, for example, just throwing out a figure, that $80,000 now becomes $40,000. So instead of me in my section having $40,000 to play with, I have to share in the pot of $40,000. So I think that is part of the consideration also. I'm not accusing anybody, but we know that subvention has been paid.
Yeah, but this is what I was going to
ask. I disagree. You know, Godfrey.
Hold on, Eddie. I was going to. This is what Eddie, I was going to speak on.
Before we go down the road to the politics of the thing, because I can draw from Trinidad and we can definitely find ways to the maze of this. But I really want to deal with, first of all, Eddie as Calypsonian and as teacher. Let's deal with that. So, Eddie, are you more do you see yourself as the writer of Calypso singing, or a singer who has found his way into writing? And the other part of that is that in all your years, how have you used your Calypso within the classroom? Not just to spread Calypso, but to teach other methods of thing, language, and so on.
Right. So in terms of I would have I started as a writer because I started writing, and then I started after writing for a couple of years. I decided to sing. Now I'm producing. I'm a producer also because I have my own studio now and I producing my music and assisting others in terms of the production of the music. No, I always used to. For me, I love Kaiso with a lot of satire and the use of puns and so on. So every now and then in my class setting, I would use that to throw at students to get them to think. So I would be talking there and just throw some of the things that I have in Kaiso and throw it at them and get them to start thinking. Because that's my trend, Nakai. So I love the double entendre and the satire, make fun of people. I always used to test my songs on my students. So when I write a song and I go to the classroom, I might sing a verse, I sing a line for them, and hear how they react to it. And that used to gauge me. Well, if children could respond to you like that, especially in them double entendre satire, then I know I'm clicking a knob, So one Kaiso in particular, I did a Kaiso called Man vs. Nature too. And I remember a lady came up to me in the semifinals and said, "This is a Kaiso we need to put in the school," because I was talking about how man would have been destroying the environment and causing, So Man vs. Nature was a Kaiso that was it. And I came up with a Kaiso when I watched the band that chased Tsunami. And that thing just pissed me and I went and write a Kaiso. And when I sang that Kaiso, it was a Kaiso that I feel from deep within. And when the lady came to me and said, "That is a Kaiso we need to bring in the school to teach, to teach the respect for the environment and all those kind of things." So I mean, as a teacher, I used to incorporate the Kaiso in the thing. Yeah? All right, Val. Yeah.
When I listen to, I've been coming to Grenada for ages, right? The period you point out, that 2001, 2002, there's a Calypso from that period. I remember, I think it was Tangler, Little Boy, was around that period. Huge Calypso.
That was about 2004, 5 or something around
2002. I think about 2002. Angler.
2002.
Probably 2002. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's clear that there is Grenada. In Grenada, there's a kind of national trait that we complain a lot, without necessarily jumping ahead and solving. So that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing 25 years of people bickering, without necessarily jumping ahead and saying, well, look, this is how to fix it, right? Godfrey knows that if we have a problem, even at rehearsal, there are members of the band who would find every reason why, this can't happen and so on, or talk long about it for a simple thing that all you have to do is to watch the score and begin to play. The problem was that somebody did repeat something or whatever, and you had to point it and say, "Hey, look, the mistake was here. This 8 bars wasn't played. Just play it over and solve the problem." But we would talk for half an hour, And if you leave them, it will probably go on and on. So I'm hearing the same thing, and I'm not saying that in any kind of derogatory or denigrating manner. It's just that it has a kind of national trait that says we complain incessantly without necessarily solving, But I think that you have to wonder how much input must the state, and I think both in Grenada and in Trinidad, I think Calypsonians themselves have to come to terms with that. How much input must the state make in the cultural forms? And if the state is putting much more, then the state would also demand more or have a greater stake in the thing. So I think those are the questions that one has to ask. How much input must the state make in terms of and I'm not even saying development, but a stake in the culture. The development has to go with the Calypsonian and how they see themselves developing and they charting across the development. But the state input, Dexter, how much state input?
But the state input still comes down to personalities, because you remember you're appointing an individual to be the minister. That minister is appointing somebody to be the chairman of Carnival. He in turn decides who the CEO is going to be. What I find missing, and both Godfrey and Teacher Eddie know how passionate I am about Calypso. I mean, I would go to the ends of the earth to a Calypso show. I think I was the first person who did a show in Grenada featuring only local artists. When we did the 40 local Calypsonians who got paid to perform on a show called Made in Grenada. But what I find is that we don't have the people who have to make the decisions, and the people you're referring to, Val, have to be passionate and have to care. And I don't think that they do. So if you care, you would want to make a mark. You would set some targets and say, okay, I'm going to be the minister for the next 4 or 5 years. At the end of that, this is what I should have accomplished. Now, what I find happening, and I'm already hearing the makings of it for this year's competition, is the heavy-handed approach. I am in charge and I want this to happen, and it is going to happen that way. As opposed to going to the Calypsonians and saying, hey guys, how can we make this better? I am in a position now to implement policy to make the art form better, to make the shows better, to make the product better. What can I do? Instead, you find people saying, hey, I am the minister, I'm in charge, and whatever I say says goes. And oftentimes, you find that security, you'll see it, Godfrey, you'll see it, you've seen it in Trinidad. The person who's the Minister of Culture has never been to a Calypso show. Does not know what the sacrifice is. How many times I have done it as a producer, as an executive producer of songs, sleeping on the studio floor. Driving up to the country during songs, making all those sacrifices. But if the people who are in charge do not understand that, then we are not going to get, like I said, the state is not going to do it, because we are depending on individuals who most likely don't care, don't understand, and are not passionate. See, Teacher Eddie shaking his head. Let me hear it.
Yeah, because unfortunately, Greta, we don't have that.
But
because our Minister of Culture.
I want to jump in here a bit, and Eddie made a point earlier when he said Calypsonians are their worst enemies. Now, earlier Val asked, or he mentioned the issue of money, and personally, I believe it is a critical issue. At different levels. I'll give you an example. So, for example, with the competition, I have sat at meetings with both, representing from both associations already, and I have heard Calypsonians put on the table that, for example, with the judging of the tents, right? If you are going to select, for example, 30 Calypsonians for the semi-final, the process should be you pick 15 from one association and 15 from the other. In my opinion, what that says to me, there is an issue of money, because if it is done at the competition level where the best moves ahead, picking 15 and 15, that won't work. You would never get the best moving forward. And so I believe that money is a critical issue. People feel that, look, it must be done in such a way where I must benefit. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. But benefiting must come with work. It is a competition. So if for you to benefit, you have to, produce quality. No, on the other hand, and Dexter made the point that there are people who become very high-handed and I am the minister, I am this, and I've heard it a lot of times. But guess what? There are Calypsonians who fuel that kind of behavior as well.
Exactly.
So I'm going back to the point that Eddie made, where some of our Calypsonians are actually shooting themselves in their own feet. So they fuel that kind of behavior rather than, as Dexter said, coming together and dictating what must and what must not happen.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, having managed Carnival, some of my harshest critics have been the Calypsonians or the soca artists. No, people in other forms of other aspects of Carnival, the mass people and the panmen would say, hey, Dexter is a Calypso man. He only seeking the interests of the Calypsonians. But they have been some of my harshest critics, to the point where they have gone to ministers and complained, and the ministers say, well, we got to fire Dexter based on what he said. It's like, no, that's not what we want. Then why are you complaining so much? So, for example, and the other thing just to go back on Val's point about the state, people have to make decisions. Adults have to make decisions and stand by them. I mean, if you have children at home and you leave dinner up to them, every night will be pizza and hot dog. But you as an adult know what is best for them, so you have to make a decision for them. So the people who are in charge have to be the caretakers of the stakeholders, as it were. So when I got involved in Carnival in 2004, I realized, for example, judges were not being paid. And I would get a list the day of, I had to call Ron Adams and said, you're on tonight. And people constantly cuss me, like, Dexter, no, we can't continue doing this. And they were driving up on their own. They had to drive up to La Poche or wherever the judging was. So we actually put a structure together. We provided transportation, and then we offer them basically a stipend to say, hey, we are going to pay you to do this. So because of that, I had a commitment. No, you had an obligation to me. So if the show was supposed to start at 8, you had to be there by 7:30, and I could make the demand because I was paying you.
Right.
Prior to that, if I call 8 o'clock in the morning to tell you come at 8 o'clock in the night, you come at 8:30, I can't quarrel with you. So those things kind of helped improve the quality of the 10th season. The Judges Association, so people have a clear understanding, again, because there was this thought process that there was this mafia and those deals were being made and those things. So we had to clean that up also. But as Teacher Eddie said, the Calypsonians who were benefiting were the ones who were critical of what I was attempting to do. And instead of coming together and providing the support, because they would come to me, no. I had a conversation with a Calypsonian about 2 or 3 months ago. And he was complaining, and I said, boss, you know that I have not been in the management of Carnival now for 14 years. The last time I managed Carnival, worked in any cultural aspect of the government was in 2010. So I said, what has changed for you? He said, well, nah, things get worse. I said, yeah, but you were one of the harsh critics. You were the one who said I didn't know what I was doing. And since I'm out of it, look at what has happened to you. So, and it goes back to the point Godfrey is making. If we make a decision as the management of Carnival or the minister, and a Calypsonian does not win, I mean, because 70, 80 Calypsonians register every year. The others, 5 or 6 of them get extremely upset and say, hey, Dexter, I'm fixing the thing to accommodate this individual. But you have to understand only one person can win. And if you really care about the art form, then you would do, as I say, do what you have to do to compete. And that is why we had the glory years in the 80s. Ajamo was not given crowns. Wizard was not given crowns. Inspector was not given crowns. This guy had to go back and walk and on the crowns. But people now feel that I heard a Calypsonian in a meeting with a minister saying that, hey, I did, and I think, and they don't want to give me a crowns. The boss say, I have crowns, and you have to go on the crown. You have to go on your crown, So yeah, so Teacher Eddie is right to an extent, and obviously Godfrey, you're right. But back to Val's point, the state has to have a developmental plan. So it is not triggered by personalities. So right now, while we have a cultural policy, there's a Spice Mass Act and so on, we don't have a developmental plan. How do we get to to point B, from point A to point B over the next 5 years. There is no plan. So in any given year, so I'm hearing, for example, in 2025, Teacher Eddie, I don't know if you're hearing this for the first time, Calypsonians will be penalized for going over a certain time limit. So if you go over 10 minutes, you start losing points. We've never done this before. The agreement before has always been, if you go over the limit, the judges stop judging. But that decision has been already made without consulting the Calypsonians. And so the state is still made up of personalities and individuals who feel that they are in control and they're just going to do what they want.
Right. I think that within the Caribbean, we are in the realm of culture as business. You know, so that Grenada starting later in terms of its development. Certainly, you're looking around and borrowings, a number of things, borrowing from Trinidad, borrowing from maybe crop over and other things like that. But Carnival is now a business. People are booking flights way in advance to come to Spice Mass, to go to crop over, to come to Trinidad, to go to Antigua and so on. And because of that, there is a lot of money involved in terms of the tourism board and so on. The Calypsonians, of course, like here, have to recognize that, have to pull together and understand that the carnival, mass, pan, calypso are not just cultural enhancements, not just things at the fringe, but it is a business. And you do have to pull together and become that formidable team that can speak to the powers that be, the state, as not just entrepreneurs, but people who own these products. You know, when Teacher Eddie writes a song, right? It is a product, right? It is his, and he's putting it out there on a market, which is maybe the stage, the calypso competitions and so on. And so I think that the idea that you're just going on stage as a performer, those days are kind of fading, and you need to see that it is bigger, because Spice Mass is depending on the pan, the calypso, the mass, in order to draw crowds to Grenada on a yearly basis. People are booking hotels. So there's the hotels, the small guest houses. I mean, everybody is benefiting. How do you fit into that arrangement? That is new, right? It is not just, having a carnival and painting. When you speak to people here and they say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm going Grenada Carnival, and they are planning months ahead. Meaning that they are putting aside money, they are doing things and getting ready for it, right? So let's start to approach it as a business and understand the business of it, rather than all the bickering that goes behind, like if it's some little school competition. It's not. It's really an entrenched business all through the Caribbean now. Governments are depending on it. So I think that if when you start to see it like that, then I think people will start to pull together and understand that they need to fix all the little petty differences that are there that are retarding the progress of the thing.
I think
it goes back. Sorry, Godfrey. It goes back to the point that Teacher Eddie made, that Calypsonians are their own worst enemies, and because they don't understand the value. And what you speak of, well, is very important, the value chain, because while the panorama and the calypso is being overshadowed by the private fêtes and some of the other things that are taking place, the fancy mass to an extent, all those elements come together to make carnival. People are coming to Grenada because there is a carnival season. Carnival encapsulates all those aspects, mass, pan, and calypso. The free jump ups, the free fêtes, the all-inclusive fêtes, and all of that. If there was no carnival, there would be no offshoot of those fêtes. Somebody would have to work extremely hard to develop a festival season. So the Calypsonian has to understand he is part of that pecking order. It is not just a hustle. I go in there, I spend $1,000. If I make a semis, I squeeze back something. If I make a finals all year, I hit a jackpot or something like that. As rightfully say, he has to see himself as a businessman. I go to Teacher Eddie's studio, I'm investing $1,500 in a song. It means that I have to go out and work the song. I have to up my presentation. I have to go to the radio station and make sure that my song is played. Not just depend on this convention or getting into a semis or getting into a final. And then if you have a hit song, if I go out and work the song and the song is playing on radio, it means that whenever there are other private shows, not just during the carnival season, but outside of the season, I will be employed and I could call a price and I could perform. But we still see it as a kind of hustle, and we depend. And going back to what you said about the state, because of the divide, the state kind of has them by the throat that you guys are still depending on us. You know, so you coming to me to ask me for the subvention, so I'm going to dictate. I have no regard and no respect for you once I have to give you that money. So I will dictate what happens. But if there is a unified body, the association says, hey, these are the conditions under which we will perform, then the state will have some respect for them. And I think the Calypsonians are not understanding that divide and rule issue. Look what we have in North Soca. Soca Monarch is the biggest event put on by the state, but the soca artists are demanding more and more. Every time the price has increased, it has increased exponentially. So it went in the same 2001 teacher ID, it went from $15,000 to $30,000. Then it went from 30 to 45, then from 45 to $80,000 because the soca artists are threatening and making demands. Now I'm hearing that they're demanding 100,000, otherwise some of them are not going to take part. But it's just one.
It's sad that some of them, because if you had a unified body, the fight you become stronger, right? But
exactly.
So now the few quote unquote top artists are the ones that call in the shot.
So, yeah, exactly.
And that's the problem.
But
the point being that there are only a few top ones, so there is still that demand, and the state still have to listen to them. With the two accounts associations, the state could say, hey, Teacher ID and your group, if you don't want to perform, the other group will perform, and we'll give them what we want to give them. You know,
that was the mashup anyway in 2001 because
in 2001 exactly.
Here's my issue here, and I want to sort of write on what Val said. The whole issue of approaching this thing like a business.
Business.
Now the artists, you have your product, and so you have Calypso, Soca, whatever it is, you have your product, right? The state, right? They must know they are tasked with the responsibility of creating that environment for that product to do well on the market. Why can't the state be serious and be genuine, right? And help Calypsonians, help the artists with their product so that everybody can benefit. Because you see, my thing is, some of the products, yes, there's always room for improvement. There's a lot of room for improvement. But if the state, right, why take advantage on the holder of the product where you can actually take that and enhance it? Because you are the biggest benefactor, you know. The state would benefit most from that. Tourism, I mean, we speak about how many people coming in and all of that. You know, Carnival will become bigger. So rather than doing that and helping to enhance the product, instead you take advantage on the bickering and then you continue to divide. You have an association, you have a body that is responsible for Carnival, all right? And you decide, look, all right, so all events, there must be, you have to pay to get whatever license. And you have an act. You have an act that spells out, right, how that should be done, all right? Fine. I have no problem with that. So the act spells out what has to be done. The act also spells out how the fee should be paid. So you use the act to make that demand. but yet still you do not use the act. You sit in your office and you decide what is going to happen at somebody's event and tell them they have to pay you X amount of $1,000. That, in my opinion, is corruption. It is corruption. You cannot do that. And these are some of the things that is creating a problem. So someone has an event, you go to get your license, they tell you, well, boy, I know you're sure, and you just pull about 3,000 people. So because of that, you have to pay XYZ. When the act says that you must pay 5% of your gate receipts. And there's so much, there's so much problem.
But it goes back to what I'm saying, Godfrey. Whatever we define as a state goes back to personality issues. So, for example, any one of us here, the four of us who are here, and judging from the conversation about Calypso and culture and carnival, if we are managing, I mean, look, Val mentioned before we came on air that, Teacher ID remind him of Black Wizard. So if a Black Wizard walks into the office and Val is the manager, immediately you start struggling. This is the Black Wizard. Mr. Wizard, although he's in competition and you're in charge of the competition, what can I do to make your life easier? When I working in Carnival, I know what Teacher ID was doing. I did some junior Calypso workshops and I had the opportunity to work along with Teacher ID. So I'm not going to punish Teacher ID or sanction Teacher ID as the manager of Carnival. I'm going to ask Teacher ID, what can I do to make your life better?
Exactly.
But what you find is that these personalities, they are finding themselves in a position where, I am the manager and he had to come to me. Yes. I will punish him for coming to me. And I had a story that I could relate to. We know Leke. Leke is probably the most prominent shortney phobia on Island right now. And Leke went to the Spiceman's office. He had to get one of the same licenses you're referring to, Godfrey, which I think is a travesty. Why would a shortney ban have to get a license to launch? Anyway, and he has to see the CEO at the time, not the present CEO, but one of the past CEOs. And the gentleman told him he was too busy. You have somebody coming from Hermitage to St. George's, and you are the CEO, and it's because of people like Lake you have the job in the first place, and you cannot make the time for him. No, somebody like me, that would never happen. As a matter of fact, Lake would never have to come to talk. I would go to Hermitage to meet Lake. So those are the individuals we are dealing with, and we refer to them as a state, but it is individuals and personalities who do not respect the culture, do not respect the individuals. Look at Teacher Eddie's background. How could you possibly want to punish Teacher Eddie and tell him in this year's competition that you have 10 minutes on stage, and after 10 minutes, we're starting to build up points without having a consultation with him? And those are the issues we're facing. And it starts from the level of the minister, come down to the chairpersons and the CEOs. When I manage Carnival, I took my staff to fan houses, to studios, to mass camps, to let them understand the people you see coming into the office, this is what they are doing at nights. This is what is happening. So when you see them come into the office and they might appear a little bit irritated or frustrated, you have to understand where they are coming from, so you know how to deal with them. But these people are sitting high and mighty in town and saying, hey, you have to come to me. And when you come to me, because your name is so-and-so, because you is so-and-so, and you feel, no, I'm in charge right now. And that continues to be the issue. But unless the state has a policy and hands somebody a policy and says, hey, this is what you are supposed to do, then we're going to keep going down that road. Because all they do, Godfrey, the only document they refer to is the Act. That is the only document they refer to. And the Act is not a development policy. We need a development policy for the development of the carnival sector.
And here is it. You create an Act to do whatever. But yet still, although you brand people's event carnival events, because they fall within the carnival season, how many of these events do you see on the calendar of activities for the carnival season?
Exactly. No, but even that again too is to me is corrupt, because you decide when the carnival season is, and it depends on when you launch carnival. Exactly. So you can launch carnival at the beginning of May. There are no activities, so Teacher ID is not going to be engaged until June or July. And then you say every event that happens after the launch in May is a carnival event. But you could well launch carnival in the middle of June, because that is when your season is activated. Yeah. Again, so that to me is a corrupt practice. But
next time, before you, hold on, time is going very, very fast.
Teacher ID, you guys have the power. It is up to you guys to figure it out that we are, because without mass pan and Calypso, there is no carnival, and people are not going to come to Grenada just to fit and just to walk around and go back. They are going to go to Barbados, they're going to go to Trinidad. I feel that if we do not get it right in Grenada, St. Vincent is going to replace us very soon. St. Vincent is doing everything right, including the international airport, building the hotel rooms.
Yeah.
They have the marijuana and everything in St. Vincent.
That's a whole lot. Time is going really fast, and I want to bring in Val here quickly. Val, with all that you've heard regarding organization and so, I know in Trinidad, TUCO is the body that basically deals with Calypso. How is it with them? Are there any similarities? Are you seeing any similarities with how this thing is done over there?
There are similarities. One is that here, maybe NCC is better organized in the sense that the government knows that every year they would disburse, $16 to $20 million to NCC. And NCC would become the body that would then distribute to the various interest groups, Calypso, PAN, and MAS, and regional and carnivals, right? So maybe it is better organized. But I still feel that at a fundamental level, we have the same problems. One is that we have plantations which are trying to become independent nation states, right? And we have plantations with a monocrop economy, with a monocrop history. So that in Grenada, is nutmeg is the dominant crop. You try planting some bananas in Jamaica, the same thing, all through the Caribbean, Guyana, sugar, Trinidad, sugar, cocoa, and so on. Basically, that we were spaces, little rocks that were growing product for foreign countries, right? And those cultural forms were not a part of it. I'm saying that the natives have developed these cultural forms now that they are products as nutmeg is, as banana is, as sugar was, right? But we do not have administrations who have pivoted to understand that, who have moved enough to understand that that is the case. So they are not just items on the fringe and just enhancement of the natives. They are now products that have to be managed, that where, as I said before, people are booking spaces months in advance and putting aside money, a year in advance to come to your space. It is now for you to understand that this thing is a business as not was, as banana was, as anything else in the Caribbean, right? And we need to do that, whether it is in Trinidad, whether it is in Grenada or St. Vincent, right? These are the new Caribbean products. These are the products that have replaced sugar and banana and nutmeg and cocoa and so on. We have to start thinking like that, and we haven't begun that journey as yet, mentally or otherwise.
Right. Gentlemen, listen. Hold on. Gentlemen, before we sing, we're out of time. But I did tell you all early that I sensed there's going to be a part 2. So I'm asking you guys to come back next week, because I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot. Actually, our telephone line started going, but we're not in a position to take any call right now because we're out of time. So hopefully next week we can get some of our listeners involved. But I really hope you guys can come back next Wednesday to continue this discussion, because I think there's so much to talk about, and I think this conversation can actually help. I hope it falls on the right air. So I hope you guys can come back so we can continue that. But that being said, we have about 5 minutes remaining. So let me give each of you all a few minutes just to, wrap up for this evening. So we start with Dexter. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my wrap-up is easy because I'm just piggybacking on what Val said. Mm-hmm. So the business decision was already made, Val, because when Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua decided to move away from the traditional pre-Lenten carnival to the summer months, the North American summer months, it was a business decision. Grenada's move was strictly economic, that more visitors are available to come to Grenada in August, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua, likewise, and we did not have to compete with Antigua. So even then, the governments understood that it was a business. What has happened since then is that we have not provided the prevailing infrastructure and the prevailing environment for the development of that business structure. So, for example, there has not been a seminar held with Calypsonians since, I don't know, probably you could tell me, and not just our judges workshop, but a seminar to say, hey guys, this is the business structure, this is what you should do, how do you copyright your music, how do you register your music, and so on. But the governments before understood that this fantastic, and think about what we have. Outside of the crops, we moved away from the sugar, the cotton, and so on. Think about what we have, the way we live our lives, the way we celebrate, the way we enjoy ourselves, the way we celebrate our African ancestry, coupled with what the Europeans give to us, can actually make us money. So while we sing and dance and party, people are coming to take part in that, watch it, take part in it, and that brings us in money. So in the 70s and 80s, the governments then understood that we had to move away from the plantocracy, move away from depending on the crops, which are very vulnerable because of being in the hurricane belt and other things, and even more so now because of climate change. And just our existence can actually take care of us, and we are not investing in us. And that, to me, is the travesty that the revolution in Grenada decided on it, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Antigua decided on it. Barbados is doing it now as crop over the end of the cane season, but we are not figuring out the infrastructure. How do we ensure that this thing goes from strength to strength? How do we improve? Because it should be automatic. What we should be doing is not struggling to put on carnival events, but extending it. How do we get better? How do we experiment? How do we add to it? No, we're still struggling to put on a Dimash. We're still struggling to put on a panorama. When we should be inventing new and attractive ways to get people here.
Right. I digress for now. What we have here. Teacher Eddie, your rap.
Well, yeah, I just want to say thanks, Godfrey, for the invitation to be on the program. I think it was very informative, and I like the from Val. I like that aspect of approaching the thing as a business. I wish artists could start thinking that way. You know that hey, it's not just about going to the studio and record to business, but it's a business. That remember the days when people used to go and record and they were selling the little cassette and the
but of course,
and the CD.
Of course,
But no, but. So we need that business approach. Maybe artists, I word to the artists, maybe you can look for sponsors to do your recording and stuff, rather than, some artists just want to go in studio and they have no money to pay and hope that when you make something you will pay. This thing is a business and you have to approach that business. Approach it as a business. When in my youthful days, I used to know that I'm going to record 2 songs. I start saving my money since way before, or I look for some sponsor. So that when I go to the studio, I can hand the studio man his money and complete the thing. Yeah? So I think I like that business approach to the whole thing now.
Yeah.
And to the authorities, well, you need, you had food for thought here. Maybe you could go and rewind the program and listen to it.
Yeah.
And learn something here.
Yeah. Val, your rap.
Well, I think from what you say, I think that there is still loads of things to discuss. And I'm willing, I'm here so that once Dexter, Teacher Eddie,
I could come on next.
Of course, definitely.
Yeah.
So we have to. Yeah, guys. Thank you guys so much. Dexter. Thank you too, because the invitation was on short notice. And you here. I really appreciate you coming. So we're looking forward to coming back next week and continue the discussion. And I just want to put it out there, an open invitation to all our Calypsonians. Look, this is a program. This is Kaiso Talk, which means that every Calypsonian in Grenada and in the Caribbean have a stake in this. So there's absolutely no problem. I would love to get a call from any Kaiso and say, hey, listen, I want to be in the program. That would just make me really happy. So there's an open invitation, so you don't have to feel, you didn't get a call from me to be in the program. It's an open invitation for every Calypsonian to be on the program and let us talk the talk. This is a way of getting the thing out there. I mean, look how much has come out tonight. I never know Eddie used to have to walk from Wester Hall to Latin. You know, to sing a Kaiso, you know what I mean? And it is beautiful. We need to get to know our entertainers. It's not just when, you know, Carnival come, you see Teacher Eddie on a stage, you know, and you know, hearing Dexter putting on a show or hearing about Legends in Concert. It's more than that. We have lives. There are things we do. How many of you, Dexter, love Oil Long? And any day, if Dexter hear Oil Long, I think Oil Long is the only thing Dexter like more than Kaiso. Dexter, right there. So, guys, thanks again, and we're looking forward to being back here next Wednesday, same time, for more Kaiso talk. Thank you, guys, and do have a good night. All the best. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, good.
All right. Leaving everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.